If it wasn't for people like me, the world would be nothing but advertisements. This artist goes by the name of Space Invaders. He is a graffiti artist in Europe, and he, instead of using spray paint, he uses little tiles to create bitmap images of characters, and then mortars them to walls. So you can't even like spray paint over it or paint over it. You have this like little tile square that you have to chip off.
Full of mosaic.
Yeah, it's okay. And he's pretty impressive the way that he does the work. And the number one thing that inspired him was the video game Space Invaders, which we're going to be talking about today. Today we're going to talk about Space Invaders, how it came to be, its programming issues. We're going to talk about the cabinet design, which is absolutely brilliant, and then we're going to talk about its influence. And then after all that, we're all going to head outside to the Global Arcade. We're going to have ourselves a Space Invaders tournament and see who here is the best Space Invaders player. All right, so Space Invaders was made in 1978 by a dude who, I'm probably going to butcher his name, but Nikishito, I believe is his name. I have a little cheat sheet for his name somewhere. I lost it, forget about it. Anyways, we're going to call it Nikishito, and hopefully I'm saying it right. When the video game Pong came out, it was really big in bars. You guys all know Pong, it's two little paddles. And the next game that came out that was really popular was a game by the name of Breakout, which you guys are probably familiar with as well. Breakout's an amazing game. It's a paddle at the bottom of the screen where you bounce a ball onto blocks and you slowly knock the blocks away. Well, Taito, a gaming company, wanted to make a game similar to that, and so they hired Nikishito to develop this game. And so he was thinking about, how am I going to make a game that's similar to that, but isn't a complete ripoff? Because he didn't want to, because there's like 1,000 Pong clones and 1,000 Breakout clones. He wanted an original game. So he thought, well, what's something that none of these games have? And that's an actual story behind it. All these other games, you're playing tennis, you're playing Breakout. That's the game. He was thinking, what if it was a game about invasion, about war? That's intense. We can use gunfire and everything. And the original design for Space Invaders wasn't actually aliens, it was people. The idea was that there was an army slowly marching at you, and you are one man who has to defend yourself against this like never-ending slaughter of people. However, when Nikishito started drawing up the ideas for Space Invaders and started drawing out the people and people getting shot, he actually was kind of appalled. And with that, it was just one of the great ironies. One of the founding fathers of video games was actually against violent video games. So it amazes me. So he decided he had to come up with a better character, something that wasn't quite as close to home, especially considering he was Japanese, and Japan had been under war for like ever. So the less war, the better, I suppose. So he was watching TV, and he saw this commercial for this crazy new movie coming out. You guys may have heard it. It's called Star Wars. And he thought, this movie's going to be big. I can tell already. It looks like it's going to be a big, big movie. So let's make it based in space. And so I need a space character. So that was the next step. How does he develop our little Space Invader characters? Well, actually, it's pretty simple. When he was a kid, he saw the movie War of the Worlds, in which these giant, like, squid robot monsters, like, try to destroy the world. And it stuck in his head. He's like, I'm going to have little squid monsters. And as far as the rest of the enemies, they were also straightforward. He's like, well, if I got squid monsters, I got to have crabs, and I got to have octopus and things like that. Octopi, I guess. I don't know the multiple.
That sounds like pie.
Yeah, what's the plural for octopus? Octopi. I'm going to say it.
Sounds delicious.
And so that gave the basic design for the game. However, and this also shows you how far technology has come. At the time, Japanese microcomputers were incapable of rendering the graphics he needed for Space Invaders. So what did he do? He decided to make his own microcomputer. See, the video game Robotron, which is the first 2-joystick game, really simple graphics, that game took about 2 weeks to make. Space Invaders took an entire year to make because they had to build a unique microcomputer. He based it off of United States hardware at the time and then tweaked it to create a microcomputer that could run the graphics for Space Invaders. The first issue he dealt with was the slowdown. See, Space Invaders, the way it works is you have five rows of aliens, and they slowly work their way down. And as you destroy aliens, it slowly speeds up. Now, lots of people think, wow, this is just ingenious programming because it makes the game more fun. But really, when all 5 rows of aliens were on screen, it's slow because the computer is lagging. It was actually pushing the hardware too far. And when you took out the enemies, the computer had more space for memory and therefore could run faster. So Space Invaders is actually slow because of how weak computers were back then. But he decided to go ahead and keep it because he's like, that works. Because he probably could have tweaked it some and maybe sped it up or had them always go at the same speed. But he said, I'm going to go ahead and keep it. And so that's how Space Invaders, the game, came to be. Now, as far as the cabinet's even more ingenious. The original Space Invaders cabinet for arcades was a bar top. Not bar top, a tabletop. Basically, the way it worked is it's called a cocktail cabinet. It stands about this tall. You sit down at it. It's got a glass on top, and underneath the glass is the screen, and underneath the glass on each side is controllers, so you can play the game. So you put down your beer or whatever drink you're having, you look down, and you can play the game. However, those don't do really well in the United States because of the way bars are set up. If you guys ever seen the way bars look, they're very cramped in the United States. That's how we set them up. And so stand-up machines are far more likely to be successful. So they hired a company by the name of Bailey Midway, who eventually made like almost every American cabinet in the 80s. They hired a company, Bailey Midway, to develop the cabinet. And the cabinet, for starts, just how it looked was beautiful. It was this big stand-up cabinet. It had beautiful art everywhere. I mean, every single inch of it was covered with art. It was gorgeous. And the bezel, which is the piece that goes around the screen, even had art that like jutted out so that it created layers. Now, at the time, the processor only rendered black and white. And I'm not talking about gray. I'm talking about the colors, just black, white, high contrast, black and white. So they had to develop a way to bring color into the game. So what they did was they took the screen and they put it at an angle facing away from the player. So you guys would be the player. And then put a mirror right here. And then on the screen, they overlaid a piece of cellophane that had 3 colors. So that when the light was reflected onto the mirror into your eyes, you would see a green ship and green shields, and then the monsters would be different colors because the reflected light is going through the cellophane. And then on top of that, they kind of painted a image of a moon, like you're standing on the moon looking into space. And so it was reflected onto this beautiful surface. And so when you looked at the cabinet, it looked gorgeous. It looked like, oh my God, I'm on the moon and all this great color. And really, none of it was technology. It was just really, really clever cabinet design. So where did the cabinet end up going and how did it affect everything? Well, for starters, in Japan, it was huge. It was huge here as well. But in Japan, it actually created a coin shortage. They ran out of the 100 yen coin, and it is completely blamed on this one game coming out. And Japanese mints actually started making more 100 yen coins because people didn't want paper money. They wanted the 100 yen coin so that they could play Space Invaders. And then as far as in the United States, arcades weren't like this. In the United States, an arcade game like Pong or Breakout was put into a bar, and that's the only place where you'd get them. But Space Invaders became so popular, it was the first time we saw dedicated arcades, and the ridiculous thing was that you'd actually see like holes in the walls of malls that would have like 20 Space Invaders machines just lined up all along the wall, and then like a pod in the middle, all just one game, and they would make tons and tons of money. The Guinness Book of World Records actually ranks Space Invaders as the highest grossing arcade game in history, and it is. I think it's grossed like $500 million off of its single stand-up unit alone. And as far as its actual influence, well, it was one of the first games that had a recognizable character, which is the little Space Invaders. Oftentimes, Pac-Man gets credit for being the first character, but when you see the little creature from Space Invaders, you know exactly what you're looking at. That's a Space Invader. And then also, they've influenced a lot of programmers. For instance, Shigeru Miyamoto, which I'm probably butchering his name as well, the creator of great games like Zelda and Mario, he said if it wasn't for Space Invaders, he would not have programmed games. because Space Invaders, he didn't even care about video games until Space Invaders, and he thought this is absolutely amazing. Now I'll be honest with you, I actually don't like Space Invaders personally. I think it's a very boring, slow game. However, as you guys can see, its influence on the video game market is so deep, and the ingenious of its creation is on every single level, from having to build your own computer to coming up with these unique characters to an insanely inventive cabinet design, all the way just to be able to rock the market and essentially create the arcades as we know it today, where you actually have dedicated arcades. So that's basically the rundown of the history of Space Invaders. Anybody's got any